everyone, and thanks for checking in with us at Funeral Innovations Trends, Tips, and Technology, where we chat with leaders in the profession to discuss marketing trends, business tips, and technology innovation. Plus, we talk about how marketing helps you better serve your families. I'm Heather Musiewski. I am the marketing director here at Funeral Innovations.
And I'm Alex McCracken. I'm VP of Sales here at Funeral Innovations.
And today we have Ed Bixby. He is the president of the Green Burial Council to talk to us a little bit about his businesses and the Green Burial Council and where the industry is going. Thanks so much for being here, Ed.
Thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure. My name is Ed Bixby, president of the Green Burial Council. I've been involved with the Green Burial Council since 2008. We are the standard bearers of natural burial for the funeral industry and for the consumer. And I'm also the owner and operator of a company called Destination Destiny with 5 natural burial properties across the nation.
So Ed, can you tell us a little bit more about the Green Burial Council and what all is involved with the Green Burial Council, or what your missions and objectives are?
Sure, absolutely. The Green Burial Council was created and formed not only to help set the bar for the funeral industry when it comes to environmental death care practices, but also to protect the consumer and educate, meaning that when you become a member of the Green Burial Council, we have a set of standards that you must meet and requirements so that you can be sure that you are committed to the industry, committed to the movement, and committed to the consumer. And when I say standards, things like protecting and preserving particular parcels or plots of your land, and having an environmental plan in place, how you can deal with the conservation of that land, and we do not use embalming or concrete vaults or things like that. It's really about nature and going back naturally.
Yeah, can you just define a little bit more what green burial means? And is there one definition, or could it be a whole host of things?
Well, green burial basically means that you're not using anything that would be toxic or detrimental to the environment in the process itself. It also means many things, but it also means good stewardship for future generations and for the forest or for our natural environment we live in. And also, oddly enough, green burial really means that the families are embracing the death of their loved one by participating. That's a very large part of what we do. To be part of that process and to be surrounded by nature during that process is a very cathartic experience. And what it allows the families to do is truly celebrate the life that was lived in an environment that doesn't feel so grief-stricken. So it has many, many different definitions, but that would probably cover the basics of natural or green burial.
And what is the growth of this been like? I mean, I know we hear a lot about it, talking to different funeral homes and consumers, but I'm just curious if we have a more sectioned off view of the green burial industry, and maybe you can talk a little bit about the growth and what you project in the future with this type of growth, and the knowledge that everyday consumers have about it.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, when this first started 15 years ago, obviously it was a very niche option, something people were seeking out. There was very few places offering it, but the irony of the situation is simple burial, as a funeral professional would call it, has existed since the dawn of time. So every natural burial cemetery, every regular traditional cemetery can offer what is called simple burial. Simple burial means burial without a vault. Doesn't mean burial without embalming. I mean, you could still embalm, but it's something that the funeral industry has been practicing all along. It's not something completely new. But the concept of creating a green space for the living that can be enjoyed by the living and be the final statement in one's life for the ones who are buried there, that concept is new. So over the years, it's been a slow progression. People have really benefited by experiencing it. The growth has been slow because a lot of the funeral directors, the funeral industry, they didn't say no to offering it. They just weren't being asked for the option. Now that more people have actually been at a loved one's burial and experienced this, that has given them a new perspective as to how they should, possibly look at what they would want for their own death care. So my feeling is that, the real growth has been in the last 4 or 5 years exponential, because so many people now have actually experienced this process. And with that, they'll ask the funeral professional for it. And the beauty of natural burial is also that we're taking a customer base that might otherwise choose cremation only because they didn't want a traditional burial based upon certain services that they didn't require or want. So that's been a great growth spurt for the movement, and the funeral professional now is getting asked for it. And I don't believe that any funeral professional would ever not try to accommodate a family by providing a service to them. In particular, a service that not only is very beneficial spiritually, but beneficial monetarily for the business itself, because unlike a direct cremation, you are now going back to what you were originally intending to do when you dealing with families one-on-one, bringing the service back to the funeral home, opposed to taking the memorialization out of it. So ironically, cremation has become such a large part of the funeral industry and what people do. And this is reversing the trend a little bit, which I think is great. And I'm sure the funeral provider appreciates that as well.
That's great. And that leads right into my next question. And I actually have a follow-up question about what you just said about cremation. Is cremation a green process? If people are saying, I really want a green burial, does cremation fit in that?
No, it really doesn't. But this is the way I view things, and I think you guys would appreciate this as well. What I understand from cremation, obviously, is that of course you're using a large amount of natural resources to create this process, and that will create a carbon footprint. Obviously, we're the land of the free, and it's about options. So I would never say to someone that what they've done is not a good thing. That's not what we're here to do. But what we're saying in natural burial now is that, and what you do with those remains after you've done the cremation process is entirely up to you, in the sense that maybe you can take those remains and plant a tree in memoriam, to bring the memorialization back to the family. And what would the carbon offset of that tree that was planted be to the carbon footprint of not only the cremation process, but the life that was lived? Of not so much the cremation process, but how we handle the remains after the process. So it's about educating the public and being able to fulfill their wishes in a good way. But it's not something that is an environmentally friendly process.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, they need to be educated about how cremation fits into a green ethos. So then my next question is, how can a traditional funeral home or cemetery incorporate green burial options into their existing business if they don't want to become a solely green burial focus?
Okay, well, that's really important. This is a very important question. Every single funeral provider should not only consider, but they should offer this to their families because it's very simple to do. Again, it's not that you have to say to yourself, I just want to offer this strictly. No one wants someone to come into the door and leave because you can't provide them a service that they're seeking. So, it makes all the sense in the world. And you don't have to overcommit or really change your business model in any way. You just have to embrace something new. So if the family comes in and they say, I would like a direct cremation, but I would like to become a tree, really the hardest thing for them to do is to go and find a facility that would possibly allow the planting of a tree with the cremains. But with the growth of the natural burial industry, now that's becoming, much easier. So it's really not that hard of a process. Probably the largest obstacle the funeral industry would have would be finding what would be considered true natural burial preserves or conservation burial grounds, because those are not as easily accessible or achievable in modern day right now, because it's not easy to create a cemetery space. But hybrid models or traditional cemeteries that allow natural burial, it happens all the time. And I would dare to say that probably within driving distance of every funeral home in the entire country, there is a location that they could serve their families with, and they may just not know it. So it's just a little bit of research, and to be a little open-minded and be ahead of the curve. Because if you can create a customer base now, you have to understand that what's life-changing about this is the actual celebration itself. The living human beings who go and attend this, they are your new customer base. And they're going to look to you and say, wow, I have been completely moved by this. This is what I want. And this guy can provide it for me. So they have to remember that. That's how we're recapturing. The funeral industry, unfortunately, has suffered, I believe, unjustly over the years, because people make decisions when they're under duress, and later on they regret their decisions. The beauty of natural burial is it feels so good. It really is changing the image of the funeral provider. They're looking at them and not imagining them as the guys who don't have any emotion, but they're saying, "Wow, he's just like you and I. He has a family. He's part of the community." So it's really it's a win-win situation no matter any way you look.
And I assume there's with organic food, right? If you're doing organic farming, you have an actual certification process that you have to go to get tagged as an organic farm. I'm wondering if there's anything like that for the green burial movement or the natural burial movement. Do you have a certification process, or are there little things that people can do just to get their foot in the door to start offering these services to their families?
Absolutely, and that's a very good question. Part of who the Green Burial Council is and what we do is twofold. We are a C6, which is a designation from the IRS, a C6 nonprofit certification organization, which provides certification and sets the bar and the standards in the funeral industry for eco-friendly funeral options. So yes, we can certify funeral providers so they can offer these products, and we can make them more readily available through our networking to the consumer seeking this product. The C3 organization, which is our consumer education organization, is the organization that is nonprofit that educates the public. So we're doing a dual-fold service here. And for instance, if you were going to be a certified funeral home, that's not really all that difficult to achieve. Basically, what we say to the funeral home is, on your general price list, you must list natural burial. You must do cemetery services without the use of embalming. Not all, I just mean, in the natural realm. And you must be able to provide a product, a burial product or container to the customer when they come to you. So to become a certified funeral director really is the easiest process of them all. Now, to become a cemetery, if you're a hybrid model, it can be relatively easily done, because you can take a small section, dedicate it strictly for natural burial, and create that space. But it's still business as usual within the cemetery itself concerning tradition. There is a thing called a natural burial ground or a conservation burial ground. These are harder to achieve because there's a lot of environmental reports that go into it concerning plant life and animal life and water conditions and deed restrictions. You must deed restrict and not allow certain things. So that's a little harder and a little more of a commitment. And then as far as the products are concerned, we have products too. And that's just a matter of what the products are made of. And as long as they're sustainable and 100% biodegradable, they can be part of this as well.
That's great. And one thing, when I was doing research for this, that I discovered is how much energy producing cement takes, and how, you think that, well, that should be sustainable because it lasts for so long, but really it's super environmentally problematic. So really good information for the public to know if they're committed to a green burial. My next question is, how do you suggest that firms tell their families about this option? So what sort of marketing should they do for their green burial services?
I think the most important thing for them to do would be to allow the family to understand that they can be an active participant within this service or celebration. So, uh, from a marketing standpoint, it's really much more about a simpler return. Everyone dies. We know this. Some people want more than others. Some people really don't want any fanfare, or they just really want to go out without anyone, even knowing. And the simplicity of what we do, the flexibility of how we do it, allowing people, not being on a set schedule, really allowing them to process and be part of the process there. For the funeral director, it's strange for them in ways because they're so used to being the person directing the family and keeping, possibly a schedule or a routine. That's the hard part I find with directors initially, is to let go of that because there's a lot of responsibility involved and they want to be sure things go the way they should go. But what they're going to find is when they allow this process to unfold and allow the families to participate, they find a greater, it's very hard to explain unless one of the funeral directors was explaining it to you. It's strangely satisfying, and in a way that it eases their concerns, where they're not really so worried about the family and what they're doing because it unfolds and, people just naturally do it. So I think when the families come in, what they need to do is say, here is a different option that allows you to do things the way you would like to do it. And if you would like a pine casket, you can do that. If you would like a biodegradable shroud, you can do that. And, the cost really, a lot of people will say, is it cheaper than a natural or a conventional burial? Of course, it's going, there's going to be some cost savings there, but it will never be like the cost savings of a direct cremation. And the services that the funeral director provides, and I tell families this all the time, you're not really making money with the products or with the service as far as embalming. But what you're doing is, of course, you're facilitating, you're procuring permits. So there are lots of things for the funeral director to be able to put into their service, make it a very not only attractive option for the family, but an attractive option for them to provide, even for their bottom line.
That's great. Yeah, I appreciate that. And Ed, as I understand, you have a lot of different green businesses. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We have essentially we've created a company called Destination Destiny, and the purpose of that company is to be a one-stop shop, eco-friendly funeral option business. We offer seed scattering, natural burial, tree of life, which is the planting of trees, in memory of people. Memorial reefs, the reefs, rebuilding the coral reefs. And now we're actually talking to some individuals about offering some natural organic reduction, and we're even working into creating programs to counsel people how to go through the process when a loved one passes away. Prearrangement. Not everyone has the foresight to prearrange, and what we understand, we do it on a daily basis. We realize how lost people are when this happens. And we want to create a service that not only serves the natural burial consumer, but all consumers, because it's the least we can do. You have to be able to connect the right people together to make everyone at the end of the day feel good about, the outcome.
And Ed, remind us where you're located.
So we have, my home, I have a couple different homes, but that's because of necessity with the businesses. My primary home is in New Jersey, and we have Steelmantown Cemetery in southern New Jersey, which is a natural burial reserve. And then I have a home in a place called Placerville, California, which is believe it or not, a hybrid model cemetery, which offers every type of mausoleum burial, cremation, niches, everything you can imagine. And the reason I have become bi-coastal, but because I've done what I've done, so you guys know, is we talk about the growth of natural burial. 5 years ago, I was burying so many people in New Jersey who had absolutely no affiliation, had never even been to the state. But it wasn't because of the property, it was because of the process, because of the way we were doing it, and people had, it was our reputation, and we decided to lead by example and grow this model everywhere if we can, help people grow it, because that's how it will become the third option that I believe someday will be right there with traditional cremation and natural.
It's interesting. So, with all of this, you're pretty far along in adopting this and moving it across the country. I'm curious how you actually started this and how you got into green burial, and what really was the calling that led you there.
That's a great question. I've done a lot of things in my life, but I've always been an entrepreneur. I started a business at 17, and I did that for so many years, and then I became a real estate broker and a developer and built homes for 25 years. And I had always had a family cemetery that my brother was buried in, located in the Pinelands Forest in southern New Jersey. My family came here in the 1680s. We've been in this country for a very long time. And it had fallen into deep disrepair. So when I approached the owner, only because it bothered my mother because of the condition of the burial ground where my brother was buried with hundreds of my relatives from the Civil War to modern day, the individual basically made me a strange proposition. He said, how about I give you the cemetery? I'm the type of guy that likes to take responsibility for things that need to be cared for. So I said, you know what, I will take it, but not to be a cemetery. And I just thought I would clean it up and mow the grass for the rest of my life and make my mother feel happy about it. After I took it and I cleaned it up, I read an article about natural burial, realized that there was a new life or opportunity for that cemetery. And that's how I became a cemeterian by complete happenstance. But I think what makes me different than most, and what I think the funeral industry really needed, was they needed someone to approach this with the mindset of a consumer. Everything that I've done only because I looked at it like, what would I want for myself? What would I want for my children? I wasn't professionally schooled in this profession, so it wasn't like a textbook model. And what I've learned is that the satisfaction that I receive from helping families and restoring these historical gems that lay, in waiting across this country, meaning historical cemeteries that some people may believe have no value, but they have tremendous value, has led me to retirement from the building business, and now I'm doing what feels right and feels good to me. That's how I got here.
That's great, and an unexpected way into the profession.
Yeah.
I'll move on to our last question. What would you say is the biggest lesson you've learned from serving in this profession?
I think the biggest lesson that I've learned is that all of us, every single one of us, has the ability to care for our loved ones in death. We may believe we're not strong enough. We may believe we can't handle it. We may believe that others need to do it for us. But at the end of the day, you should be able to care for your loved ones the way you cared for them in life. We have been caring for our dead since the dawn of time. It's in our DNA. People don't believe they possess the ability to do this. When I talk to them about their children and their children who have passed and they're devastated, and I say to them, remember, they're always with you. As long as you live, as long as you see, you carry with them for the rest of your life. They live forever. So celebrate the life that was lived by caring for them in death like we cared for them in life. And when you are able to release that burden from an individual, when you can allow them to be part of that process and you can see the pain wash away, that's when you understand this is what we should be doing. This is the way it always should be done. And I don't want to say anything about traditional burial saying that takes that away from them, because it certainly helps people. But this process is very, very different, and it unlocks this innate ability to be able to cope with death and celebrate someone's life and not get hung up in a place where you can never recover from it. So that's what I've taken from it, and that's what I believe is the true message. And of course, the environmental part is a wonderful benefit. How can you not get behind stewarding, future generations, but what it does for us within our heart and souls is what it has done for me. And that's, what I've taken from this process.
I love that, Ed. Really appreciate you sharing your I guess passion behind this and hearing your history. For all of you out there, if you want any more information, you can go to greenburialcouncil.org, and Ed and his council have tons of information and anything about the certification process there. If you'd like to stay up to date on any of our other trends, tips, and technology videos, you can go to youtube.com/funeral innovations, where we have plenty of other topics. We want to thank you, Ed Bixby, with the Green Burial Council, for being on the TTT interview today. Appreciate your insight, and we will catch you all on another episode of TTT.
Thanks so much, Ed. We really
Thank you very
appreciate
much.
it.
Thank you, Ed.